it's going to pick up anyway. Okay, so when we had personal computers, we would have personal accounts. So I would have a Paul account on there, and maybe a P. Benfield account over there. If I want somebody else to be on that computer, I'd create another person. Maybe put Lisa on there and put Lisa on there. But those would be local user accounts. And I think if you have one or two people, that's not a big deal. In fact, most of you probably have it set up this way at home. So you install the computer and it says, who's this user that's going to use it? And then you say, Paul's going to use it. So that's what your login is, and you're okay with that. Say you decide to have, somebody else connected, you're just going to add another account onto there. The problem is that when we start having more and more and more computers, I have to have more and more accounts that I have to keep track of and organize and whatever. So we don't like doing that because it's like, okay, which computer is this? I mean, all of you hate having different usernames and passwords just for the different systems you're working with. Can you imagine being in a company and having to have different username and passwords for every computer you walk up to? That'd be just kind of not great. So the whole idea of going from a peer-to-peer network with local user accounts to a client-server environment shifted all of that. So a client-server environment, I take the user accounts and I move them to the server. And yeah, they don't get rid of the local user accounts, but we don't worry about them. So now I'm really concerned about logging into the server. And this is called a server-centric environment. And it's very, very popular, client-server environment. Server-centric just means I'm taking all those user accounts and putting them all together. So now I have one Paul account, no matter which computer I log on to, which means that I have one username, it all expires all at the same time or whatever. As companies grow, though, what happens? You add more servers. And in a server-centric environment, I now have more and more accounts on different servers. So if computer 1 wants to log into that computer, it's going to be Lisa. And if computer 1 wants to log into that one, it's going to be L. Smith. And so we kind of run into the same issue that we had with local accounts on local computers. Kind of, centralized on a server seemed really cool, and so we added more servers. And then we have this whole idea of multiple accounts on multiple servers. So what do you think we want to do?
I would say consolidate.
Consolidate, and that's what we do. And that's where directory services come in. Directory services. And we're going to have all kinds of names interchanged along here. What directory services is the ability to now centralize the server-centric environments. So I'm not going to have individual server accounts anymore over here. I'm going to be having basically network accounts. And I'll just get rid of those. I'll put the server back though. So now I have one list. And I'm going from client-centric to server-centric to now network-centric. So now I am able to log onto the network and have access to all the different network resources that are available to me. Sounds pretty cool. Okay, so now a couple things. First of all, there's different directories that are out there. There's lots of companies that have thought of this idea. So it's like, let's make this server-centric environment consolidated or centralized and make them, bring them all together. It's a directory concept. Microsoft has obviously come up with one, and their product to do this is called Active Directory. That's where the term Active Directory comes from. It's just a make and model. It's just a brand name of a directory services. There's other ones like Novell Directory Services. Linux has some directory services that are available. LDAP, you may have heard. It's lightweight directory access protocol.
That's Linux, right?
But it all has to do with directories. What's that?
That's Linux, right?
It is. It's an open source. It's used all over the place. In fact, Microsoft Windows uses LDAP for some of the features as well. So, but those are some terms that you might hear. Another term that you might run into or hear is called a domain. And a domain is what is inside this network-centric environment. So I can have servers still out here, and I can still be server-centric. and I can have another account out here called Bob, and that computer can log onto that computer. And so there's nothing wrong with that. It just means I'm not part of the domain. If I'm saying, you know what, I don't want to manage all these user accounts, let me use your list of things, well then it's called joining the domain. So you join the domain, and now when you want to access me, you're getting actually authorized through another entity. I don't have to worry about all those individual user accounts. I trust you. You're going to let the people in that are supposed to let in. So, okay, so we have the term of domains and directories, Active Directory. Now, it's pretty obvious, if I have a local users, where is that database kept to keep track of those users? Locally. Okay. Server-centric. I have a servers and clients. If I'm going to have a list of people that I want, again, going back to the server-centric, let me just bring this back over here. Where is that list of people kept of who can log on to that server? On the server. Okay. Next question is, now I'm a network-centric environment where I have a directory. Where is that database stored? The cloud. Somewhere. Absolutely. It has to exist somewhere. So it's really obvious, you know, it's going to be local or it's going to be on the server. Once you go network centric, it's like, I don't know. So excellent observation, it has to go somewhere. It's a database, so it has to be a bunch of files, so it has to go somewhere. And what's really cool about it is you get to choose. So if you want to put that database there, that's perfectly fine. Now that's where it's going to physically be. So it's physically going to be on that server, but logically it's going to work outside of that server. So logically it's like a hedge around the entire entity. So everything has to pass through it to get into it, but it does physically exist somewhere. By the way, if I decide to put the database there, what does that server then become?
A database server?
Close.
A domain controller.
A domain controller. Ooh, boy, we're having all these terms here.
Called DC if you want it.
A domain controller.
DC1, DC2.
Or we call it simply a DC, a domain controller. Absolutely. And that's why you end up making a DC1 and DC2, because it's going to end up being a domain controller. So we could have renamed it later on, but then your virtual machine names don't match and all that kind of stuff. So we kind of jumped ahead and renamed everything DC1 to begin with. Now, why would I have a DC2? That would imply that I'm having a second copy over there. Oh, CD? No. How do you spell DC? DC1, DC2. Why would I have a second one?
That looks like DC.
Redundancy, absolutely. By the way, in the old days, and I don't remember 2008, 2003, somewhere back there, we actually had a primary domain controller and then a backup domain controller called a PDC and a BDC. That's actually gone away. So now it's called a multi-master. There is no primary backup. Everybody is in control, but they're equal. Now the advantage of that is, let's just say, let's kind of back up to here to a local computer. If I'm trying to log onto this computer and the computer's not on, how successful am I to logging on? Not very successful. Okay, so that's kind of obvious. Okay, so now this computer's on, and again, going back to the server-centric, and I try to log onto this server, but this server is down. What happens? I can't log onto that server. Okay. Now, it's like, well, that's just that one server. I have this whole network. What if I only have one domain controller and it's turned off? How about me accessing all the rest of these servers, though?
No.
Why not?
Because you have no access.
Because that's the list. That's the access. So if it's not there, you're not going to get anywhere. So what's nice about having multiple ones, is that they do synchronize with each other all the time. If I need to take one down, and you always have to take a server down for some reason or another, maybe an update or hardware repair or upgrade or whatever it's going to be, you can bring it down, take your time, whatever, it doesn't make any difference, because this is still being kept over here. And it's going to be giving people access. I can update people, I can change things, do whatever. You bring up the first domain controller again, it says, oh, okay, we're a little out of balance, let me get synchronized, we're all good. Then I can take down the secondary one, and the first one is just going to keep working, and so your system will be up all the time. 2 questions. Okay, so that's the concept of the network-centric environment that defines our domain. Inside of our domain, we're going to have domain controllers to help manage those databases or whatever. We have a couple more terms I'm going to talk about, and again, if you've been PC Sport 2, you already have this. We have forest and trees that kind of go with this as well. So we're very domain-centric. We concentrate on the domain, and that's where we have domain controllers, and that's where our entity, that's where everything is. So I have one set of users that's going to log into a whole slew of resources, and that's going to be a domain. My domain, however, can have subdomains. And this is all called part of a namespace. A namespace has to all do with that top level domain. So I'm just going to start with, oh, I don't know. Well, use Kohler. This is bad because this is not probably how Kohler does it, but you know, why not just throw it out there? So this would be a domain, but Kohler really has completely separate businesses that are going on. So they might have a generators section, and maybe an engine section, and maybe a hospitality, and then they have what, porcelain or pottery? Pottery, that's what it is. Pottery. Different sections, which are completely separate entities of their own. So this, the generator domain, could be its own domain potentially. I'm not saying this is how it is at all. I should actually go over there and find out what it's like. But this will be its own domain. It's going to have its own servers, its own set of users. It's going to have, you know, all of its own stuff in there as a completely self-contained network. But it's going to be part of the naming of Kohler. So it might be something like, so it would be then generators, and it's abbreviating here, .kohler.com. So anything within that namespace is considered a subdomain. And it could go down further than that. You know, maybe there's, I don't know, gasoline ones and there's diesel ones. I don't even know, well, diesel, I before E, except after C.
Well,
Okay.
there's no such thing as rules in English language.
So it could even have more and more subdomains from there if you really wanted to. Not very commonly done because realizing that it's a completely separate entity. So then I'm keeping track of different sets of people. So like here at LTC, if I was keeping sets of, you know, the business technology instructors completely separate from like another set of instructors, you know, we really don't interact at that point. And so we would have to have different accounts to log on to different servers, and this becomes a mess. Because this is one domain with multiple subdomains, and just remember though, each domain is completely its own. So it's going to have its own domain controllers in every single one. They don't go cross domains. This, actually I should go back, make a different color. This is a tree. And that's where trees come in. And there's different references to trees, you know, folders and hierarchy structures. In a domain world, this is a tree. It's a domain and all its subdomains based on a namespace. So anything that ends in Kohler.com down here is going to be all part of the same namespace. Now I could have another one. I don't know, Newell Rubbermaid. Newell Rubbermaid was a company I used to work for. I should go back and make that red.
Well, you should go back to work then.
Yeah, there's advantages of that. Newell Rubbermaid, and one of their divisions was Mural. And then there's Anchor, Hocking, Glass, and whatever it's going to be. But those all be part of, you know, the one namespace. So it'll be miro.newellrubbermaid.com or whatever. And therefore, this makes up another Tree, absolutely. What happens when you have, and say that Kohler and Newell Rubbermaid decide to have some kind of actual technology, trusted relationship, maybe they bought each other or whatever. If I have two trees that kind of trust each other, I'm trying to go with the analogy here, I don't know, but this is where we get forests.
So basically,
That's a forest.
a bunch of trees that are right next to each other, like companies.
It has to do with,
trust
right.
each other.
Right. So, and I should really come out, I should sit down sometime and think of really good examples of where this is done. But you have company mergers all the time, where, this company merges with this one, and the IT departments actually come together. But they keep their same company names. So, say that Newell Rubbermaid and Kohler merged. In fact, Kohler just bought somebody, a UK company. I just read it. But if they bring themselves under the IT, they'll probably come together underneath the same forest. But it's not going to be company blah 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 Kohler.com. It's going to still be the company name, and that's how it's being managed. Yeah.
So AT&T bought DirecTV.
And the whole idea is that the whole Active Directory environment is meant to be scalable and continually scalable. So I can keep expanding my forest. I just keep adding trees. And, just add more trees and more and more and more trees. I could keep growing this forever that way. In addition, within each domain, I can keep doing subdomains and subdomains and subdomains. So I could have infinite number of trees. Well, it's not quite infinite, but it's a lot with many subdomains. And so if you think of how it's managed together. So, yeah.
Can you have a forest within a tree?
In practical terms, doesn't seem like.
How often does this happen? Not very often at all. And I was trying to think of examples, and every place that I've ever gone and actually looked at, and any place that I've ever worked at, this is what it looks like. I have a domain, and I have a tree, because you have to have a tree, and you have to have a forest, but that's it. Most organizations will have a single domain and a single tree within their forest. So you can only have one forest. Well, I guess potentially you could have multiple forests in a company. That'd be really separate, though. I'm not sure why you'd ever do that. But so this is what most companies look like: a single domain. Just because you have the domain, you already have the tree. And once you have a tree, you have a forest, obviously, right? I don't know, kind of.
So it's more of a, really, forest is something you need to know because it's something that could happen, not something that happens regularly.
A forest is always there. It just may contain only one tree. Realize that forest could grow to 100 trees, though. The tree has to have at least one domain. So you have to have a domain, which means you have to have a tree, which means you have to have a forest. But you only have to have one. But realize, you know what? I could expand, and I could expand multiple different ways. I could expand by being a subdomain. I could expand by being another tree. And I guess completely separately, I could make myself a separate forest with trees over here. But there'd be no connection between them at all. They'd be really separate entities. So that's what, let me get rid of those. That's what most likely you're going to see. We're going to end up talking about what are called organizational units. This, you can organize things within a domain. And so if I had a company that was just really large, but had a single focus of mind, I would use organizational units then to split it up to be like Europe or Asia, US or whatever like that. My example back here of, wow, that scared me. Kohler, they're truly separate companies. I mean, I don't know that. I shouldn't say that. But I know Newell Rubbermaid, they are. Like Miro had their own president, they have their own HR department, their own IT staff, everything. They have it's their own company, so it's really their own domain. It's part of them, so you need to have that connection or whatever. It's part of their namespace or whatever. But other than that, it's really kept separately. Same thing with, I'm guessing generators are run completely separate from hospitality. You know, the people who build the generators have nothing to do with the golf caddies. There's just, it's a completely separate entity, so. So we're going to talk about organizational units actually next week, I think. Today we're working with Active Directory, understanding domains, understanding this whole concept, and actually building some today. So that's our goal for today.